My name is David, and I'm the founder of FRIEDA. FRIEDAcommunity, the non-for-profit, whose mission is to reconnect generations, takes this opportunity to thank members and donors for their financial support, allowing for such events to take place at FRIEDA. Before we start our conversation with Nancy Hellebrand, I would like to share with you a quick overview for the evening. The artist talk will likely take us past 7 p.m., so probably 7:15, 7:30, after which the FRIEDA team will serve a dinner at the counter. For those of you who would like your copy of the book signed, we will ask you to do so after dinner or at a later date that we can try to organize. Due to the limited time we have for the talk, I will take 5 or 6 questions at the end of the conversation. And if you have more questions, then we'll try to gather them and to address them throughout the channels. So I will now introduce you to Nancy Hellebrand. Thomas and I have known Nancy for as long as FRIEDA has been open, more or less 7 years. Nancy and Casey, with their friends Michelle and John, would be brave enough to come to our community suppers. So our community suppers, for those of you who don't know what they are dinners with 10, 12 people. They're kind of surprise dinners. You never know who you're going to meet there. And so they were brave enough to come and join our community. Over the summer, Nancy was part of the group show People, one among 35 artists. Following the group show, Nancy and Thomas decided to work on the exhibit currently on view. Knowing how uncomfortable Nancy is talking about herself, I'm honored to do her this favor. Nancy Hellebrand is one of Philadelphia's most highly acclaimed living artists. Her work has been exhibited in some of the most prestigious venues on both sides of the Atlantic, including the Tate Britain, National Portrait Gallery, Barbican Center, Tate Liverpool, on this side of the Atlantic at the MoMA, the New York International Center for Photography, Pace McGill Gallery, in Philadelphia at PMA, at PAFA, the Prince Center at the ICA, Lux Gallery, Paul Carver Gallery, in DC at the National Museum of American Art, and the list goes on. Nancy Hellebrand has received a John Simon Guggenheim Foundation Fellowship and a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship. Her work is held in the permanent collections of the MoMA, PMA, the Princeton University Art Museum in New Jersey, Yale University Art Gallery, Museum of the City of London. She has taught photography at Yale University, the Parsons School of Design, and here in Philadelphia as well at UArts, or what has become UArts. So FRIEDAcommunity is proud to introduce you to artist photographer Nancy Hellebrand and to some of her most recent work. I will please join me in welcoming Nancy Hellebrand. Nancy, good evening. So before we discuss the current exhibit, which shows a small selection of photographs from the Naked series, would you please take us on your journey as a photographer and artist from the Londoners at Home series that you shot from 71 to 1974 to essentially Naked, your latest work, an ongoing series that you started in 2017 of naked bodies of older women.
I don't know how I'm going to read my notes and hold the microphone at the same time, but...
You did just fine.
Is the sound okay? Is that loud enough?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm on the first row.
Okay, I'd like to start with a picture from 1963, actually. Is this better?
Yes. Okay.
So maybe we can try to turn off the light to get the better.
The first picture is when I was going to the University of Southern California in 1963, and it was taken my second semester there, and I didn't really know what I was doing in college. Wow. Okay, good. I didn't know what I was doing my first year in college. I was at USC, and I just didn't get it. I didn't know why I was at that specific school. I didn't know what I didn't know where I was, like I'm sure many people don't their first year in college. Can you hear?
Yeah.
And so I dropped all my courses in the second semester, and I picked up photography. And I was very fortunate because they were commercially oriented, and I was the only woman in the class. It was a time when photography was seen as male. And the teacher, very fortunately, even though he was a commercial photographer, we had nothing in common, it just worked. I'm so grateful to this man. He was very gentle, and he didn't mind what I was doing, which I wasn't staying on course, and it just allowed me the freedom to sink into photography. Can you guys see that? It's really big. It's actually probably 10 by 12 in a print. It's a 35 millimeter picture, and I was very much aligned with the black and white photographers of that time, like Cartier-Bresson, like Robert Frank. Aligned meaning these were the pictures I was looking at. Social justice pictures were the pictures that I was interested in, and that was certainly where I was coming from. More about that in a minute. So I left school after that second semester and worked with a number of photographers for about 10 years. And they all were different from each other, so I stayed with each one maybe 2-3 years. One was commercial, one was fashion, one was editorial. And it was very helpful to get these different perspectives. I never went to school, graduate school for photography. That was just around that time becoming something people would do. I didn't even know about it. And so then I moved to London in 1970, and that's when I really got my feet on the ground. And I didn't have working papers because I was the wife of a student, and that was just a great, wonderful thing. And I studied photography with Bill Brandt. And if you know his work, he's just a fabulous photographer. He said he was Swiss, but he was German. And he was a very elegant European with a fantastic eye. And I responded to his culture. And most of the people who I've learned from, I'm responding to who they are, and their pictures are pulling me in. I'm happy with them, but it's basically I'm being impressed by individuals, how they're living their lives, and what they're doing, how they're using the camera. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So this is one of the pictures I took in London. I did a series that took the 3 years I lived there that was on people in their own homes. And at that time, you could just see somebody in the street you wanted to photograph, and you would ask if you could photograph them, and you'd go home with them. And there it was. I could take pictures, and it was very relaxed, and they'd serve me tea, and it was just beautiful. So it was, that whole wonderful moment in history, it served me well. And so there's one more picture from London I'd like to show. And this is just a great gift. This woman knew what she wanted. She lived across the street from me, as did the previous guy. But this woman, she was taking off her clothes, and I never would have had the nerve to ask her to. I wasn't interested in that. And yet it was so beautiful because what I learned at this time, and in particular from her behavior, what she was doing, was that if you're open to it, people will sync with you, and you will sync with them. And you're no longer doing something that's your private thing. You're doing something with somebody, and it's really about the relationship. And if I would be open to it, it would be given to me. There's nothing to chase. It's all handed to me. It's just, that was the lesson. Next one, please. And what I learned was, or what in looking back, in particular for this talk tonight, I'm aware of how intimacy is really, has been my subject all along. And that's intimacy with just about anybody. And it involves, for me, it involves the camera. And my secret is that I don't want anything. I really don't. I just want to be with the person. And that's very rare culturally, as we well know. And, you know, if you can figure out how to be quiet, you can be with somebody else who you don't know. It can work. Or that, you know, that's what's working in my photographs. And it sounds corny, but I do think it's a kind of love. And I really feel that when I take pictures, I love that person for who they are. And it's, no, it's not a love that is how most people would call it, but that's what it feels like to me. And then we're going to jump to 1980. 81, oh, I forgot that. Let's get that one in there. This is another nude that I did. This is probably 1978. And can you guys see these pictures? Well enough, okay. So there was a Polaroid camera that artists could use that was 20 by 24 inches. The picture would be 20 by 24. And it was just fabulous. The Polaroid Corporation had 2 of these cameras in this country, and one was in Boston. And if you could get somebody to write in for you, you could go there. They would give you an assistant. They would give you film. It was just incredibly generous. And don't ask me, I have no idea why I asked for nude models. I didn't know anybody in Boston, so I couldn't ask anybody to pose for me. So this was like a miracle. They got models. It was just incredible. And the assistant really was wonderful. I remember him, John somebody or other. He was just wonderful. And then in 1988, my father died. And there were a lot of condolence cards that were written to our family. And I started to read the condolence cards, and it became clear to me that it was the handwriting that was moving me, and it wasn't the words, it was seeing somebody else express themselves through their handwriting. And
Nancy, I think they're actually showing the wrong photo. They're showing
I
Kensington,
forget what
I believe.
sorry.
They're showing Kensington, I think.
Yeah, thank you. I skipped that. Okay, so after this one, in 1981, I was in Kensington and Fishtown, and I was photographing for a book that a family friend was doing, and I fell in love with it, and I started going there a lot. And I was teaching at Bucks County Community College at the time, and I would go with students sometimes. And it was just, it was like a ballet to go there, work on the streets, and I was used to interiors. And on the streets, obviously you don't know who you're photographing. And it's such a rich experience because you're there, you know what you're there for, and that's how you're relating, and it's just a miracle. And these are very small pictures. They're 4 by 5 inches, and some are smaller. I was making platinum prints, which have a brownish color to them, and they're it's an old-fashioned process that was just coming into being popular around that time. So now we're going to the 90s, okay? Let's see what's next. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so this is back to the condolence letters. This was an absolutely pivotal moment in my photography. I was taking pictures of close-ups of the letters or of something, maybe the address and how things were written. And as I said, the draw for me was the handwriting. And I happened to meet John Copeland, who was a photographer working at that time. He was also a writer and curator. And he was a very crazy guy, very much of the 60s, lots of drugs, lots of sex, lots of living on the edge. Very, very brilliant guy, fabulous photographer. And I didn't do those things that he did, but he was a very steady photographer, and I only met him several times. I went to his studio several times, and I showed him my work, because in those days you would just call a well-known photographer and say, "Can I show you my work?" And you would do that. You could get their phone number, it was no big deal. And so he liberated me somehow. I mean, all of the stuff he did was crazy. I didn't do any of it. Well, but anyway, so it was, he gave me the key. And during that time, I started inverting the pictures, I started printing them upside down, and I was liberated from the handwriting as I had been photographing it. So this is 4 different negatives put together. It's just a typical one. And everything I'm showing you is leading to the nudes. I eliminated all landscapes, all any pictures that were other than going in a straight line to the nudes. So this was learning to see more broadly and getting more out of the documentary mode, the several times I met John Copeland. So then it's the 90s. My children are growing up. I met Casey, my husband. We got married in 97. My kids were in their teens, and we moved to Florida. We moved to be with the Sufi community there, and it was absolutely fabulous for about 8 years, but we stayed for about 13. And it was sort of a desert in terms of my needs as a photographer. So we moved back to Philadelphia, I am so happy to say. The point, though, is that in the 90s, and around that time we moved to Florida, I started using color. I was using digital cameras, and I started using color. And obviously, that's a huge transition. Both of those features are huge. And also at this time, my mother was sick. And she would be sick for 22 years with Alzheimer's. This is a pic. Yeah, this is good. Yeah. So this is a picture of her. I did a lot of photographing of her when she was sick. And it was continuing that need to have intimacy with other people. And of course, I was very intimate with her. You know, I loved her so much. And you know how devastating it can be. She died in 2012, and what I just realized yesterday was that I had the same reaction as I had when my father died. I got into handwriting. And in her case, it was handwriting that she did while she was sick with Alzheimer's. And these were the years when there was a lot of shame attached to Alzheimer's. You didn't tell anybody. It was, very private. It was made all the worse because it was so private, so secret, and so humiliating. And luckily, that seems to be a lot less true at this time. And so I started photographing a book that a book that one of a caregiver who was with her for almost all those years, she had mom do a thing that was called her homework journal. And she would say, "Come do your homework. You've had dinner. Time to sit down and time to work in your journal." And it was fabulous. It gave her something to do that she could do. Whatever she did, it was right. So it was so interesting that, here I am on handwriting again. And I have gone back to these pictures 2 or 3 times in recent years, and I haven't really figured out how to do them correctly. I think I love this one here, and I've done a number of them that I love, but my understanding right now is that this would be an entire engagement, that I would have to really get hold of it and work with it for a long time to do it right. So I may not go back yet again. I might let it go now, I don't know. In 2016, there was another huge thing that happened. I started photographing with a woman who got COVID tonight. Her name is Shira Yudkov, she's a photographer, and we started collaborating. And I had never collaborated before, and it was really a whole new ballgame. You get so possessive about your work, you're so used to doing it yourself, and it's yours, and there's a lot of ego crap in there. And having the working equally with a partner, this was just really exciting. And she's a generation younger than I am, and we worked on old women's clothing. And we would go to the AIDS thrift store and other places like that. I would bring in things from when my mother had died, clothing or handbags. And Shira would bring in her grandmother's stuff, because that's the generation of old ladies she was relating to. And it was really exciting because there's something so tender and yet so funny, and we could do humorous things and silly things, and it was extremely liberating. Okay, now we're getting into the work that's on the walls here. Oh, this was stockings. And it's so funny, with time, even in just like 10 years, these pictures now, or not 10 years, less, this looks like a homeless person to me. Times have changed, and it's really wads of stockings. You know, we were photographing, we liked photographing intimate, like what used to be called lingerie and stuff like that, in addition to many other things like sheets and like lots of clothing and hats and handbags. And that was around the time my work stopped being shown. Funny, old people's clothing is not of interest. Their handbags, you know, nothing is interesting about old people, which you may know if you have gray hair. You're just not seen. You don't seem to have whatever it takes to be there, be present, be desired. I'm not talking sexually again. I'm talking about be desired because you exist. Be recognized because you're there. Like want to be known, be heard. Just isn't the way it works. So I started photographing eyes of old women, and I did that as a way of getting, this started when I was 70, and it was a way of learning who are these old people, like who am I? What's going on here? So this is, I was doing interesting stuff with it. This picture is about 3 feet high, and I was smashing them because I felt that's how you're treating us, we're dirt. And so I would take the pictures, I would get all my anger together, and then really go after and mangle the picture because I felt, God damn it, this isn't right. And I would just like summon my anger and get in there. And technically this was extremely difficult. You can't do this with photographs, it doesn't work. And most of them did not work, so I moved on. And the other reason I moved on is I realized I wasn't seen enough. And then I thought, oh yeah, photograph them nude, that's it. And so this seemed like just a logical place to go. You know, how do you look at somebody? How do you find them? I don't care about the cosmetic appearance, I don't care about the clothing, I really care about what in the hell's going on. And so this was the way to do it. I think, oh, that's another eye. That eye project was really fun. The first one you saw was, as I said, like 30 by 46 or something. And this picture is like 2 inches. So anything to change the scale. And I haven't stressed scale in this conversation, but that's always extremely important to me and very difficult to figure out. It's like always a major thing. And as you notice in this show, scale is hugely important. And it really, I guess, will always be with me as something that's really important to think through and feel through. Right, so I'd like to show the other one first and come back to this. Okay, sorry, the next one, the last one. Yeah, that was it. That, okay. So this I took 2 weeks ago, and I absolutely adore this picture. It means so much to me. It's it's similar to everything that's on, or you could say it's part of the series that's on the walls here. It's a woman who I have photographed previously, and I just feel this is such a strong photograph, and I've been photographing since the show's been up, and it's been so peculiar to me that I'm getting great pictures. I would not expect to be photographing right now. I'd expect to be relaxing or, you know, taking a breath. And this is what's happening, so it's really thrilling. And there are no faces in these pictures, and that gets some people bent out of shape. And so I'd like to go back to the previous picture. And in this picture, it shows her, even though she's wearing pants, which is different from all the others, you can see that all I look at when I look at this picture is her face. And so I think it's very typical that if you show somebody with their face, you look at their face. And a number of people have said, yeah, because it's genetically programmed. That's what human beings do. They look at the face of other human beings. And so this is why I'm not including them. And now can you go back to the other one? Yeah, so this would presumably be printed quite large. The other one is very small. It's like 5 by 7 inches. And I framed it in this gold frame. It's very sweet, but it's not, I don't want to go there. I don't want to take that route. So I believe that I'll just continue what I have been doing for a little bit longer, and then I'll see. But I do feel that I have found the subject matter that will occupy me the rest of my life. And then this afternoon I got nerves. I wasn't making myself clear, or last night. So I wrote a manifesto that I would like to read you to make sure that it's out there. Okay. A few years ago, I fell when rushing home for dinner. When I told friends about it, I was tempted to say I tripped rather than fell, because falling is so old lady, and after all, I could justify it by knowing it's also true. I did trip. Now, at 78 years old, even the slightest verbal, physical, or behavioral mishap is clouded by embarrassment and fear of appearing old, irrelevant, and as if I'm losing it. Shame is lurking in every move I make. But looking at this shame head-on feels like cleaning up toxic waste. My mission has become to show that old women are worthy of our deepest appreciation and acknowledgement of what we have lived through. We are all beautiful in so many ways. For the past 60 years, my intention has remained the pursuit of social justice for all. But that's not why I do these photographs. I just want to point out, so that first picture you saw is identical in impulse to the last picture you saw. The pursuit of social justice for all. But that's not why I do these photographs. It's because I can't not do them. It's in me. It is me. I photograph because that's who I am, a photographer. The end.
Thank you.
So Nancy, well, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and taking over your journey as a photographer. Now we're going to look at the Naked series, and I just wanted to touch on a few points about your creative process. First of all, where do you find these women? Do you, how do you find these women? And do you call them models? Do you?
No. They are not models. I don't want anybody modeling. I want them doing nothing. And that's hard. And finding people to pose is impossible. And I accost people a lot. I run ads in Next Door. I do anything I can. I don't tend to photograph people I know well, and I don't tend to photograph friends, or it's a little bit more awkward. And I love it if I photograph somebody I've only talked to on the phone and I've never met them. I just think that's the greatest thing. But basically, I really work hard. It is not easy to find people. And if anybody here would like to pose, good.
An open cast. I mean, one thing some viewers were asking me, they were wondering how many shots do you take before you find the shot that you select, and how do you go about the selection process?
I used to take a lot. It doesn't take long, but I used to take a lot of pictures, and now I take very few, and it takes 15 minutes. Used to take much longer. And sometimes a person who's posing might want to talk before or after a little bit, but that's not it. So the photography part is quite short at this point. I photographed somebody recently. It was 27 pictures with a digital camera, and you know what you want. 27 is not considered much anymore. In my book, that was great. I don't want to be wasteful in terms of energy or in terms of perception. And after I photograph, I try not to look at the pictures for a while, maybe a couple of weeks, a month or so. And I always pick the wrong ones if I look too soon. And also, I picked pictures for the book here. Oh shit, I want to talk about the book for a minute. In editing pictures for the book, I went back to look at everybody I photographed, and I picked different pictures often. So it's very hard to know. I keep changing my mind. I'm a Gemini. Watch out. You know, I like it this week, and next week not. And somebody I work with in the studio is shaking her head yes, because it drives her crazy. And I just want to do two digressions. I work with this person who's shaking her head, who helps me a ton on the computer and in other ways. I work with a guy who's probably here, who does Photoshop for me. And, you know, I can't do it anymore, and I think that's very important. I can't handle the very large prints anymore. They're too much for me. I literally cannot take the print from the printer to the table without messing it up. And so, you know, it's really humbling. I can't do it alone anymore. And I'm so tremendously grateful that I know people who can help me, and that, you know, it's a transition time. I won't be able to do this the rest of my life. So it's fabulous. So that's really important. It takes a village, and I got one. So that's great. Then I want to just say something about the book. I think that book is so out of sight, so beautiful, such a gem. I just love it. And I love it because it gives you a totally different perspective on the content from the pictures. The pictures are individual. There are very few of them here, which is just great. And yet it's different, and it's a real powerhouse to look at the pictures in the book. And so many women pick that up and look at every single picture. There's something about, if you see enough of them, you get it, that you're regular, there's nothing wrong with you, and that this is just it. And I think it's really important. So I'm thrilled with the book. Okay.
The other question that came up from viewers was, how do you decide how to cut the photo? How do you edit the photo? You show certain parts of the body and a bit more for the, I mean, how do you make that decision?
That's all intuitive. That's not thinking.
It just...
Yeah, no thinking. No thinking. It's like...
All right, so very intuitive. So you talked about your influences. You talked about mentors, Bill Brandt, when you first started in London. You talked about John Copeland. And as I was researching, you know, our talk, I did come across other photographers and artists who have chosen a similar topic older naked bodies, whether men or women. And I did bring some, to your attention. I mean, John Carpenter, I think, Body Part 2003 is what comes to mind when you think about naked bodies, older. And more recently, Joan Semmel at PAFA, those of you who may have seen the show, as a painter, did also tackle, the subject. How different? I mean, there are many differences, obviously, but if you were to pick a few major differences between where you are today and how you tackle the subject and what predecessors have done, what comes to your mind? I mean, you talk about intimacy, you talk about no faces, for instance, that's another, big difference. Is there anything else that comes to your mind?
Yeah, there's a woman, Marna Clark, if anybody knows her work, who's photographing old people, herself and her husband in particular, not old people. And I feel like, no, there's a better example. What's that movie where there's the woman who's like 65, who's a movie star, and she starts having sex with a young guy? It was came out like 6 months ago. I don't know movie stars. But it's a woman about 60, and there's a full frontal nude of her at the end of the movie. And I just feel that that or the Marna Clark pictures. What was it? That's it. Yeah, that's it. And I feel like the difference in what I'm doing is that it's nothing. Like it says it in the front of the book, and it's like when people come to me, come to be photographed, I don't tell them what to do. You're not doing anything. You're great because you're here. Like that's really a miracle. I don't know you, and you're taking your clothes off, and I got my clothes on, and it's just. I think that's the thing that's special about this work. It's just really looking at somebody's body in a way that you generally don't have that privilege, and I think that's amazing.
Do you find it difficult for the women who are in front of the camera not to pause, not to be acting like models, just to be themselves? Do you find it, very difficult to get them to that state of mind?
Yeah, it's difficult. I don't think I could do it. I really don't think I could do it. So.
Yeah. I think about the work, this new body of work that you've done, and I always wonder, how relevant it is today, and how relevant will it be tomorrow, or for posterity. I mean, you and I had a back-channel talk about these two questions, Is there anything that you'd like to share with us in terms of how important you think your work is today, how relevant it is today?
I think it's super relevant because, look, nobody wants this work. I mean, it's not of interest, period. Since 2016, when I started photographing old women's clothes, I haven't had a single show, I haven't had pictures on a wall. There was one gallery that had a show and they included me, and it was a couple of years ago. Nothing happened. These pictures are not in demand. So, but my experience is that when women see the book or when women have come to see the show, there's plenty of interest. So, there's something happening here that's extremely, I would say, that has a good draw, but it is not in demand.
You and I talked about, you qualify these photos and you've used, again, the adjective tonight. You view them as beautiful. You used beautiful many, many times on the last talk we had. And I actually pushed back and I said, Nancy, I think we can agree to disagree on this point. When you think about the canon of beauties in Western civilization, older age is not one of them. Youth, more voluptuous women, skinny at times, but always youth. And then somebody brought up to my attention the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, which I wasn't familiar with, and is this something? So for those of you who like me didn't know what it was, so I'm just going to read from Wikipedia. Wabi-sabi is a composite of two interrelated aesthetic concepts, wabi and sabi. Wabi may be translated as subdued, austere beauty, while sabi means rustic patina. So very apropos, I think, from some of these photos. Wabi-sabi is derived from the Buddhist teaching of the three marks of existence, specifically impermanence, suffering, and emptiness. So these lead to the next question. Do you feel that consciously or subconsciously you are challenging our concept of beauty with this series? You're forcing us to look at beauty in a different way.
Yeah, I have one friend who keeps saying, she's older, I'm not beautiful. I hate that you think that everybody's beautiful. I don't think I'm beautiful. I look in the mirror. I've got horrible this, how I don't look. I don't like the way I look. It just, stop saying that these women are beautiful. And my response is, I do think they're beautiful. And I think if you look at any of them, you can't help but think they're, lots of times you see the strength, lots of times you see the tenderness. Whatever you see, it's another human being, period. So, it doesn't compute that we are not beautiful. Everybody has their own beauty. And one person said, well, that's the whole point of the show. It's not conventional beauty, it's something else. And that's certainly true. It's something else. It is not a 24-year-old sexy woman's body. Right, well, I don't think it is. And the point is, what it is extremely valid, and every bit as valid. Everybody deserves, everybody as a person, they all deserve respect and honor. Done.
One aspect of these photos, and I did share that with some of my friends when I first saw the show, there's a lady, there's one of the photos of a lady who had a double mastectomy. And when we had the first slideshow and you showed those photos, it really got me because, as I may have shared with you, it reminded me of my mother, who at 55 had breast cancer and had double mastectomy. And I wish, as a 55-year-old, she had met somebody who could have told her, you'll be fine, you'll be okay. And so that captured for me this powerful aspect of your work, which is storytelling. Do you view yourself as a storyteller through these portraits of bodies?
I hope so. And I photographed a number of people who had mastectomies, and my experience is they're fine with it, a lot of them. It's like portrayed as this horror, and it is. The illness is, I don't want to get derailed here, but I feel that I really was impressed with how easily everybody seems to be carrying their own scars. Everybody's got them, or so many people do. By the time you're a certain age, you've got scars. And I just was repeatedly impressed that it's not getting a lot of people are carrying their scars with a lot of dignity, and it's really, it's who you are.
And one of the ladies who is part of the show, I don't see her here tonight. I was trying to see if she would be in attendance. She was here at the opening, and she shared with me her story, and she said how liberating being in front of a camera naked had been for her. How she had so many fears of traveling, fears of going some places alone, and all of a sudden, after that experience, it's almost like some form of epiphany. She just felt so liberating, and she described it as an empowering experience. I mean, that was just, very, very surprising, description of her own experience. So not your experience as a photographer, but her experience as a subject.
I would say most people find it very empowering to be photographed, and they're grateful that they've done it, and they don't understand what the big deal was. So at the same time as being very relieved or grateful or getting over a fear of it, at the same time, it's nothing. It's sort of interesting.
And the natural question to this, do you consider yourself as a feminist?
I told you.
Would you consider a similar project with men?
No.
Good.
I did do this with men for a very short period, and it was sort of stupid because I mean the men were fine, but it just there's a tension which I don't want to be bothered with, and I don't know the male experience, and I really don't, and there's such a divide between how men and women are perceived and how they perceive themselves that I can't really find a reason to photograph men. There is a reason for me to photograph women. This is my life, and I have that curiosity, but not for the men.
All right, so now we're going to turn to the audience. So if you have any questions, please, I will ask you to stand up and ask a question as loud as you can. We're going to start from the way back. Yes, Darlene?
Have you or would you consider photographing a transgender woman?
I think I photographed 2, although I wasn't told that, and I think it would be wonderful, and they haven't called me.
Thank you. Next question.
Repeat the question.
So the question is, have you photographed or have you considered photographing a transgender woman? I'll take another question. Yes, Jean?
There's been a lot of different perspectives on the size, so we were wondering how you decided to make them the size they are.
So the question is, there is a lot of different perspective on the size of the photos, and how did Nancy decide on the size of the photo, essentially the small size?
This exhibition is so specifically installed at this space with its needs, and with its needs socially, with its needs it's such a specific space. I think it's fabulous. I think it has been so liberating to do something in this space. And I also want to say that just putting this show together has been so fabulous. Putting a show in a gallery has a lot of stress and a lot of competition about it. I don't know what, competition with everybody or in competition with the world. And it's hard, and it's not fun, and it's not relaxed, and it's ego-driven, and it has a lot to do with money and commercial success. At Frieda, there's none of it. It was unbelievable. This was so empowering, so creative, so liberating. I can't tell you. This moved me forward in my work beyond anything I could have imagined. There was more joy involved, more excitement. I just couldn't be happier. This is like a miracle. And I got an email from the Philadelphia Museum 2 days ago, and the subject of the email, in capitals, I think, was, "Try our 5 restaurants." And I thought, right, museums are becoming Frieda, and Frieda is going to become a museum. Perfect.
Next question. Yes, Charlotte.
I have a question about, you talked about the reception of your photos and the reception of the book. I'm wondering about the difference between the intimacy of looking at photos in the book and the public nature of looking at the photos in the book.
So Charlotte is asking the question relating to the differences between looking at Nancy's photos or Nancy's work in the book, the photos in the book, or looking at the work here on the walls, or large or small size. Yeah.
I didn't hear a question. I mean, I heard your words, but there's no question.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you had any thoughts on the difference in the intimacy involved in looking
Oh.
and having an exhibit on the wall.
I like it all. With only this project. I've never felt that way before. But this is very elastic. It works, and I even printed them smaller than the book one round, just to see. You know, so I think it all works. And I think that's unique to this project, and I don't know why.
Pamela, you had a question? Yeah. Yes. Okay, Jean, ask your question. All right. All the way back, Michael.
Yes, I was wondering what kind of reactions you noticed from young ones.
What kind of reactions have you noticed from the young viewers? So that's a question for me, I guess. Well, you know, I will qualify the reactions, not to generalize, you know, but I would say young up to middle-aged women who really, really, really like the photos. They really like the photos. And actually, as a matter of fact, this weekend, I had a young woman having brunch on her own. She was visiting, she was at a conference, I think, and she goes, oh, you know what? It never crossed my mind to think about how I will, what I will look like, or how I will look like in later life. And it never crossed my mind. And this is a moment where I'm confronted with it, and I'm thinking about it. But the response has been overwhelming, positive. They just love the big size photo. They think it's dignified, it's empowering, it's beautiful. You know, they love the way that the shoulders are pulled back, you know, and she's just, they'll look at me, I'm visible, don't look through me. So that's been the overwhelming response from our yoga audience. Now, from older adults who are also patrons from here, I have to say that, and I share this with you, so comments such as, I don't want to be reminded of what I look like when I look at myself in the mirror. For me, I told you this the first time. I said, Nancy, I don't want to see my mother naked. I'm sorry. For a man, I don't want to see my mother naked, right? So, or somebody even told me this is not aesthetically pleasing. So I think we've seen a fairly broad range of reaction, but I think from yoga, I mean, you know what? Actually, we have a few young members in the audience, so maybe I'll put you on the spot. So maybe, you know, we can hear from them. Would you mind just sharing, you know, what you think about the show and about the photos? I mean, no obligation, but if somebody, you know, is willing to just stand up and just share your views and your opinion, yeah.
Me? You want to do it? Okay. Well, can I stand back there? I have to come up here? Okay. Well, personally, I think the female body is beautiful, and I have a lot of connection. Well, I'm bad in front of people. I have a lot of connection with my grandmother. I didn't get to really know her, and I wear her every day in many ways. And when I originally met Nancy, I'm sorry, I'm really bad at speaking in public. But when I originally met Nancy and saw these photos, I felt really connected to all of them in a deeper sense than the body. I practice a lot of, and spend a lot of time with myself, you know, trying to seek inwards. And so the form is something that I'm not super connected with. I feel like, you know, my body is here and it's now, but these are just, there's no moment, they're just moments of beauty. And to be reminded of that, you know, my body will move into that, but what's inside is always inside. And so it kind of full circles for me. I think of my grandmother, her form when she left, and my form where it is now. And I think these are a really beautiful reminder of that. And so it's a little deeper, I guess, for me. But as a young person, I find a lot of beauty in these photographs and like what's behind the lens, that comfort that these women have to stand there and to show themselves. So it's kind of big blob of a lot of things, I'm sorry, but I think they're absolutely gorgeous, and I think they should be continued to be shared.
Well, thank you very much. So I think we're going to stop here. I'm just going to give Nancy the last word, but before we get there, so our hope for Frieda is that the cultural institutions in Philadelphia and beyond take a close look at your seminal work and realize its importance for its artistic, social, and political significance. The visceral nature of your work and the range of emotions it creates among the viewers makes your work timeless, universal, because it is a reminder of our own mortality. I will leave you with two quotes. I do not pretend to address the problems of all women in the world. My work is personal, and I speak for myself. Women artists have to speak for themselves and then unite to fight the political fight. Joan Semmel. The second quote, one should not only photograph things for what they are, but for what else they are. Minor White. And so, Nancy, I will ask you as a final question, what would you like the audience to take away from this show and from our conversation tonight?
I have no idea.
So once again, it's it's you leave freedom to to the audience to take away what they want to take away from from your photos, from your work, and there's no guidance it's pretty much a free spirit type of approach. Well, I just
You know what? I feel like I've done what I can do.
You put it out there.
So, yeah.
You put it
So
out
that's
there.
all I can do.
For the universe to just
Yeah.
embrace it or take it and make
Yeah.
what they want. Yeah. So anyway, I just want to thank you, Nancy, for your generous gift to Frieda and to our community. And please join me in thanking